Has your plant hobby inspired in you a dream? Somewhere you really want to see? Well, ever since I first became interested in plants many years ago, I've yearned to visit a tropical rainforest, to see exotic plants as they grow naturally, to be surrounded and immersed in lush giants. I wanted to see things like epiphytic orchids, pitcher plants, giant aroids, and maybe even catch a glimpse of botanic gems that can't be grown in this part of the world, not even in botanic gardens. Plants such as Rafflesia, the largest flower in the world. I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and this video, together with a few more that will follow, is all about my recent trip to Malaysia and Borneo to see plants in their natural habitats, tropical exotic plants. Join me on the first leg of that journey, where I visit my first rainforest in West Malaysia. In January of this year, I arrived in Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia. But before flying to Borneo, I decided that I shouldn't miss the national park of Taman Negara. Taman Negara is a protected area that straddles 3 states. It's one of the world's oldest deciduous rainforests, estimated to be more than 130 million years old, and it's full of rare and endemic species of flora and fauna, from Rafflesia to tigers. Of course I wanted to go. Just to clarify, I travelled independently with my husband to Malaysia. We weren't part of any group. We didn't want to be tied to any itinerary. We wanted to see what we wanted to see at the pace we wanted to see it. Also, we didn't stay in luxury hotels, and mostly we didn't eat in fancy restaurants, preferring to be part of the local community. The first challenge was how to get to Taman Negara, which is 228 kilometres, that's 142 miles north of Kuala Lumpur. When searching for transport between almost any 2 places in Malaysia, Google Maps returns the very unhelpful message of, "Sorry, your search appears to be outside our current coverage area for transit." There are local trains, buses and taxis in Malaysia, but most of these are not listed on the internet, making planning quite difficult. Instead, there are loads of ads for tours you can join at hefty prices. I wanted at least 2 full days to explore Taman Negara, so joining a day tour from Kuala Lumpur was not an option. In the end, I found a shuttle service from the capital to Kuala Tahan. Kuala Tahan is the small town on the edge of the national park where you can find accommodation. The 5.5-hour journey involves a vehicle change at Kuala Tembeling. Here we get the first glimpse of the river. Until recently, the second part of this journey involved a boat trip on the river to the park. We arrived at the small village of Kuala Tahan about 2 p.m, and after checking into our accommodation, we went down to the river to get a boat across to the national park. Thick mist curls along the riverbank, obscuring the forest beyond. There are floating restaurants on the Kuala Tahan side of the river, great places for dinner, and here you can find a boat ride across to the park. It's the only way to get there. When the water is high, you need to get to the restaurant via some planks. And then on the other side of the platform is a little boat. The boatman here doubles as a waiter in the restaurant. The boat journey over to Taman Negara is exciting and filled with anticipation. The fare is fixed and very cheap, and that's one thing I love about Malaysia. People are really honest and you almost never have to haggle over prices. By the way, I don't think there are any crocodiles in the water, as no one told us not to put our hands in. Later in Borneo, we were warned never to put our hands in the water over the edge of the boat, as there are lots of crocodiles and they're always hungry. It's a steep climb up to the park from the river, and here we can see a luggage haulage system on tracks for lifting up the luggage of those who stay in the park. We registered and got a photo permit and started exploring. The front part of the park has a lot of pretty planting, including non-native things like the giant South African ravenala. I'm surprised to see this bird of paradise relative here, but I guess it grows well in Malaysia, as I saw it in several other places later on. But while the park's use of non-native plants is very nice, just beyond the jungle beckons. It's time to go in. On our first day, we did a bit of exploring, following some of the mapped trails. The public hiking trails have a raised wooden boardwalk, making them easy to navigate, even in sandals, and some trails are quite flat. In places, the boardwalks are a little dilapidated, and this requires climbing off and on again. 2 weeks before we arrived, the rains had been very bad and many wild animals exited the jungle to escape flooding. Some elephants found their way into the boardwalks and damaged the structural integrity in places, making the boards sway disturbingly when you put your weight on them. On day 2, we joined a guided all-day hike to a waterfall. It was a mistake. I'll tell you more about that at the end. And on day 3, we further explored the various hiking trails open to the public. For your own safety, there are certain trails that you may not follow without a guide, and you must certainly not wander off into the jungle. At first sight, the forest appears a uniform leafy green interspersed with the brown of tree trunks. My eyes dart from plant to plant, and I feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of all the plants I don't recognise. I normally consider myself a decent plants person, but here there's a different frame of reference. At first, I can only make out the broadest of identifications. There are lots of aroids and epiphytes. But most trees are unidentifiable as they rocket upwards, leaving any foliage far out of sight. There are many enormous dipterocarp trees. The dipterocarp family holds 16 genera of mainly tropical lowland rainforest trees, including Shorea. Shorea is commonly referred to as Meranti, and its wood is known as Philippine mahogany. It takes some time for my eyes to acclimatise to what I'm looking at and to recognise plants. I find Brasseopsis, a plant loved in Ireland by anyone attempting a subtropical garden. And there is also Amorphophallus. I love this genus with its big, stinky flowers, and I grow Amorphophallus konjac myself at home, in a pot. I recognised the epiphytic fern, Asplenium nidus. It clings to tree trunks, making huge nest-like clumps, as the name suggests. There are more than 246 species of fern in 26 families in Taman Negara. There's also Marantha, but the markings on the wild varieties aren't as pronounced as those on the cultivated varieties we have in our houses at home. The jungle is full of lianas. The term liana refers to various long-stemmed woody vines that are rooted in the soil at ground level and climb up on the trees to reach the light. They're very atmospheric. There are also plenty of lethal-looking spiny palms. Here it's not so bad as they're mostly away from the boardwalk. Later on in Borneo they seem to be attracted to me because whenever I stumble or fall, I seem to grab or fall against one of these things. I believe this spiky stem is the rattan palm from subfamily Calamoidea, used locally to fashion sturdy furniture and basketry. There are several good examples of cauliflory too. Not cauliflower, cauliflory. That's when plants flower and fruit from their main stems or woody trunks rather than from new growths and shoots. These may be from the ficus family. Ficus aureophylla is endemic to Taman Negara. Sometimes the tree canopy would shake and leaves would fall, almost as if a wind were blowing. This means that monkeys are passing overhead. We spot macaques high up in the trees. This plant is the peacock fern. Actually, despite its common name, this plant isn't a fern at all. It's a spike moss. What's a spike moss, you ask? Well, it's Selaginella. Mostly occurring in tropical areas, Selaginella has spores of two types and is sometimes included in an informal group called the fern allies. The one I really notice in Taman Negara is the blue one, Selaginella wildenowii. The colour is mesmerising. According to UNESCO, the park also hosts Selaginella mirabilis, scabrida and selangoriensis. Selaginella is sometimes used as a terrarium plant at home because of its handsome appearance and need for a lot of humidity. Among the ginger species in Taman Negara is Zingiber spectabile, and I was lucky enough to catch one in bloom. There are so many gingers here. Besides the genus Zingiber, there is Etligera, globa, Hornstedia and Geostachys. It's a real eye-opener to those who only know Hedychium. After a few hours, my eyes acclimatise to the green and the jungle reveals dots of colour. Pom-pom bunches of crimson berries, miniature turquoise butterflies and the bronze unfurling of new leaves. This one is the juvenile foliage of the betel nut palm. There are large, harmless termite hills too, a sight I haven't seen since I was in West Africa years ago. But what's this? I've been keeping my eye out for orchids, especially Ludicea discolor, but sadly I've seen none. But what's this epiphytic climber competing with another vine for space on this tree trunk? Could this be the endemic Hoya pusilla or one of the vanillas endemic to Southeast Asia? Fungus or fungi that feed on dead plant material are called saprotrophic fungi. They fulfill an important function in forests. These fungi are Pucana speciosa, and in mostly green jungle they really stand out with their vibrant colour. I had hoped to see Thismia arachnites, a really fun little fungus with an almost flower-like presentation, but I didn't spot it. Don't worry though, I'll have a treat for you in terms of the weirdest fungus when we get to Borneo. Taman Negara is a hotspot for biodiversity as it hosts many species of flora and fauna, and many of them are endemic, rare, vulnerable or otherwise threatened in Malaysia. The park boasts more than 3,000 species of plants and includes Rafflesia cantlei, which unfortunately I didn't see. It also has more than 30% of the known palms in Malaysia, including the endemic Liquala glabra. Now we're back at the entrance to the park, looking out across the river to the floating restaurants in Kuala Tahan. But before we head back, I must, as promised, tell you about my second day in Taman Negara. This is when we joined a group for a 6-kilometre hike to Terrace Waterfall. It seemed like a brilliant idea, a chance to see places in the jungle that we couldn't normally get to, and perhaps to see different plants too. The group was small, totalling 7 people, including the guide. I had been warned beforehand that the hike would involve some climbing, but that was okay since I'd been gifted a great pair of hiking boots at Christmas. The hike started well, full of chat, and the guide gave us great tips and information, happily helping us to take photos. Unfortunately, no animals were present at the viewing point. The tapirs weren't around that day, but so it goes.
Look at me, like that. Turn the leaf.
That way.
Okay, alright. Okay. Harder.
What am I doing wrong?
You break the leaf already. You break the yeah. Just break the leaf actually. Yeah. Yeah. Just break the leaf. All right. Okay. No. Without leaf, you're not allowed to make.
Yeah,
like
I know.
Because of different meaning, you know. Different meaning.
We then all traversed the canopy walk, which was enormous fun, and set out on the route, which hugged the river edge. That in itself was a bit disappointing because I felt that there would be more interesting plants to see further in. The couple in front of us spotted some wild boar, but they had disappeared by the time they were pointed out to us. So it goes. The hike was fine at first, despite the wet, muddy conditions, but before long we came to our first climb. The climb wasn't bad. It involved hoisting oneself up a bit on a steep hill. I was glad of my boots and pitied one of the girls who had only the flimsiest of cloth shoes. We walked on a bit. Then there was another climb, and another, and another. It all became very intense. You had to watch your feet constantly to avoid slipping, with no time to stop and look around. The climbing increased in difficulty, although any one climb wasn't particularly challenging in itself. It was just the frequency of climbing that was exhausting. Normally, you need to check before grabbing any tree or branch for support in the jungle. This is because there are so many poisonous insects, including the venomous centipede, but when you're constantly climbing, it's impossible to remember. There was no turning back either, as we wouldn't be coming back the same way. By the time we reached the waterfall, my husband, who's 67, was exhausted. I wasn't far off myself. He stripped off and lay in the shallow water of the waterfall. Fish nibbled his toes. I would have liked to follow his example, but my trousers were so adhered to me with sweat and mud that I knew if I peeled them off, I'd never get them back on again. Eventually, the biting fish became a bit much for him and he climbed out. That's when I saw the leeches on him. 3 of them. Now, leeches aren't something terrible. They don't carry diseases and they don't hurt, but they are a bit freaky. By the way, the trick you'll hear about on the internet of removing them with a credit card, well, it does not work. If attached, it's best to just leave leeches in place, and when they finish sucking your blood, they'll just drop off naturally. This takes about half an hour to 45 minutes in my experience. If you pull them off, they may regurgitate on you and there's a danger of infection. So hubby got dressed again with his newfound sucky companions, and soon we were off to take a boat for the rest of the trip. Joy! The boat stopped at a settlement of the nomadic Batek tribe, who are black. They are one of the various tribal peoples still living within the national park that are collectively referred to as Orang Asli, meaning simply original people in the Malay language. Despite government efforts to settle them in permanent villages, many of these communities still abide by their hunter-gatherer traditions, moving from place to place. At the settlement, we had a go at the blowpipes with poison darts, which the Orang Asli used to hunt monkeys, and witnessed one of them starting a fire for our benefit. Incidentally, the Orang Asli still perform sky burials of their dead. We had actually passed a parachute-like contraption in the tree canopy at one stage on our trek, and our guide had said he would explain it to us later. We hadn't realised at the time that it was a coffin. The visit to the settlement was, however, marred by the feeling that we were intruding and the fact that we were completely drenched from the boat trip. So, to summarise, hubby and myself resolved to avoid guided hikes after this experience unless they were leading us to some very wonderful plant. I think they might be great if you want to challenge yourself, but not if you want to see plants and feel immersed in the jungle. And now we're back in Taman Negara Park at the end of day 3, waiting for a ferry boat to pick us up and bring us back to the village. But there's no ferry, and it's getting dark. We try waving, but no one can see us over the other side. I volunteered to climb back up to the park to ask the restaurant how to get the ferry. Climbing down the steps to the jetty again, I see that hubby had the clever idea of turning on and off the light at the jetty and had attracted the attention of the ferryman at last. Although relieved, it was sad to climb into the boat, knowing that it was our very last day at the wonderful Taman Negara Park. I really loved this as an introduction to a rainforest, and I hope you did too. If so, join me on the next leg of my journey, which is to Borneo, a botanic hotspot. You can expect a lot more botanising. Thanks for watching, thanks for liking, thanks for commenting, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!